So the state had reached out to cities through the State Department of Commerce, and I think we got the notification on February the 20th of last year, and the deadline was March 1st. So that was challenging to turn around in a little over a week what our suggestions were for the state with regard to these designations. And one thing is we didn't have a city commission meeting in that time frame, so that was a challenge. But we wanted to be able to take advantage of this opportunity, knowing that there were only going to be 70 of these designated within the state. And there are really some significant benefits that could accrue to the community as a result. So staff submitted a letter to the state that outlined 4 different suggested census tracts that were eligible in Lawrence to be looked at, and some of the rationale behind that. All of that is available on the internet if you want to go and look at it in more detail. But in general, as we were thinking about it, it appeared that we only had certain tracts again that were eligible. We had one tract that we knew had existing significant city investment and community investment in, which is the large tract that Jordan pointed out on the map. That includes the eastern part of the downtown area that stretches all the way out into Lawrence Venture Park and East Hills Business Park. Well, that area is obviously a significant employment center for the community. We have a significant investment there. We have an interest in trying to help businesses expand there, and also perhaps new businesses to move into that area. That seemed like one that really rose to the top, and it was also an eligible tract. Then that same census tract, we knew we were dealing with the issues of the food desert. In fact, been talking with the Treanor group, Bill's group, on a grocery store project right in that area. And one of the things the state requested was try and identify things that you have that are currently ready to go. So that project was one on the list, as well as the available opportunities in the business parks that I mentioned. And the other tracts that we looked at we suggested tracts that were around in the downtown area, knowing that the downtown master plan was something that we were going to be embarking on, that the city commission has identified in the strategic plan. And hopefully the outcome of that downtown plan will be pointing to some things that people would like to see in the downtown area, then the community can be a little bit more proactive about using these tools. Then the other tract was the tract that encompassed a lot of the KU property that was also shown on the map. That was the one that also got designated. And the thing that we could point to there was that KU had established the partnership zone with the KU master plan process, and the Bioscience Technology Business Center, the BTBC, is located right there. That has a lot of opportunity. That's the area that's located, if my bearings right, just to the south of where we are. So once the state received that information and went through their process of looking at all the communities that had submitted requests, I think they ended up replying to the city and telling us that we had the 2 tracts designated. And we learned that, and we've kind of been waiting to see what has come out about the rules and the regulations. And as Steve and Jeff had mentioned, there's been quite a timeline involved in that, just kind of learning what is going to be involved and what the rules are for things.
When we look at other place-based investments like new market tax credits are typically tied to, well, they generally are tied to kind of distressed or severely distressed census tracts. So they're going to be looking at making investments in particular areas that have particular levels of poverty or unemployment, or those are kind of the 2 major classifications. There are some other things that may or may not, food desert, for example. But we know that place-based investments do work. New markets have leveraged over $80 billion since 2003 and created over 1 million new jobs in low-income communities throughout the country. Folks that are deploying and using new markets are really supportive of the program, but that is kind of a similar place-based investment. So in the same way, the new markets are place-based, the opportunity zones are as well. In terms of evidence of how they're going to work, it's ultimately because this is an equity investment, you have to have viable projects within a zone. So because it behaves as equity, you have to have a return of capital at some point on that. So investors are going to be trying to make decisions about whether there's a viable project within an opportunity zone. And so we know that it's a function of the potential, a function of how many potential investments there are. But I think as has been mentioned, we kind of view this as a shallow subsidy. It's just really a small piece of the capital stack. It's increasing after-tax returns to the investor that, may make a marginal project beneficial or kind of may pull the trigger, but you're probably going to end up seeing these combined with other tax credit tools such as low-income tax credits, historic tax credits, and probably the markets as well. So, I would say that there is evidence that these place-based investments do work, and so there's kind of no reason I don't think why you can see similar effects with opportunity funds.
And this is kind of a follow-up to you and some of the comments you just made. So we'll start with you and then provide an opportunity for those to comment too. We've heard about and you just mentioned in pretty strong detail the need for quality investments because that's going to drive that process. We've also heard about trying to establish the actual opportunity zone. Is it a chicken or the egg kind of situation? Which do you feel, as a panelist, would be the priority? Is it to start to identify your capital or your potential capital source, and then go seeking quality investments in the community, or is it driven by the project itself? That's kind of the first step.
I mean, all the investments I think are going to be a function of whether the project can kind of stand on its own legs mostly. I think that the investors in potential projects will make a determination based on what they're seeing. They're going to have their own assessment about opportunity cost of their money, risk tied to that particular investment. So I think that you have to have a viable project. So I think that begins to kind of drive the decision. If that particular project's not returning what an investor may want, then they may be looking towards using opportunity funds in order to kind of close a financing gap. It's a cheaper source of equity, for example. So I think it all starts with a solid project, and then it starts with a solid project, and then investors can kind of make their own call. But I think that communities, if they want to see particular investments, if there are particular projects that are thin on returns or marginal, then that's where a community can kind of be a player, I think, in helping to connect. If it has particular policy priorities that it wants to see, and begin to connect projects with potential funds and investors.
So if they can go out and locate a project that's in one of these zones, it's going to create the opportunity for them to be able to defer that gain for a longer period of time and not have to pay the tax immediately. And ultimately, if the project is a good project and successful, they're also going to get some additional benefits from not having to pay the tax and depreciation of that particular project. So just like kind of exchanges drive a lot of business transactions, because somebody sells something, then they go, oh my gosh, I go find something to buy now. I think that's what's going to drive a lot of these types of investments probably, because you're otherwise looking at losing. If you have a fully depreciated property that you've held for many, many years, you're going to lose 30% of your investment if you don't find something else to invest in.
So I think there's a few entry points for the state as far there are funds being established, as Bill was mentioning, people are looking for these investment vehicles. So there are funds being established across the country to facilitate those investments. And at the same time, they're looking for projects. So some of those will be looking for industry specific or regional specific. And as those come up, we continue to talk with folks in that area, connect with other players in this market. And when those opportunities come up and they look like a good match for us, we'll make that information available to those that we know are interested. So part of it is being able to talk to interested investors and to communities who have projects and know what the priorities are in the communities. So that's kind of on a smaller level, getting exposure on a one-to-one basis or a piece of knowledge to another piece of knowledge. On a larger scale, we're working on developing an economic dashboard. So that has a lot of potential to use as a widespread marketing piece. The communities that are really being aggressive about marketing their opportunity zones and the projects and opportunities available there are getting a fair amount of attention on a national scale. And I think the more that we do to align what we have here in Kansas to offer that other states don't and talk about it and incorporate that into our business recruitment and some of our other efforts at the state level, that draws interest to our opportunities. So those are a couple of ways that we can do it. We're also looking at different platforms for folks to be able to reach out and market themselves and connect communities with those opportunities as we go forward.
Most of you guys are probably aware you can do like-kind exchange in real estate. Typically what happens is when you close on the sale of the property, you have 45 days to identify up to 3 properties that you want to buy. You then have up to 180 days to actually acquire that property. And if you're successful in doing that before the 180-day period, then you basically have a complete exclusion on the gain, which is a permanent exclusion. Unlike this program, which is just temporary, it's a permanent exclusion on gain until, I guess, you sell it for cash later. Now so a like-kind exchange in some ways is better than an Oz investment, but the Oz investment is broader in many ways. For example, if you have capital gain that arises from the sale of a business, if you have capital gain that arises from the sale of personal property, which no longer qualifies under the like-kind exchange rules, if you have other types of capital gains besides just the sale of real estate, or if you have a like-kind exchange and you can't get those 3 properties under contract, or you can't figure out what you're going to buy within 45 days, which happens a lot, guarantee it, then you've got another fallback, which is to do an Oz type of investment, either through a structured program, and there's national players out there providing structured programs, or if you have a particular project that's in, say, Lawrence, in East Lawrence, or in the industrial area, or out here on campus, where you can make an investment that otherwise qualifies. And you have to keep in mind you have to build something. But unlike the like-kind exchange rules, where typically if you're going to build something new under the like-kind exchange rules, you have to get it built within 180 days, which is hard. And so under these rules, you have more time. I think you have up to 30 months to actually get your project built. And so there's a little more flexibility under these rules in terms of allowing you the time to get the project built. And so I think there's going to be situations where you're going to possibly not have like-kind exchange as an option, but you still have the Oz investment as an option. And again, assuming you can find something that you want to invest in and is otherwise a good investment, there's a lot of positives associated with that. I think the other issue too is if you're going to do a project and you don't otherwise have capital gains, you're just going to put cash in the deal, but it's in one of these qualifying areas, you might want to look at doing this anyway, because you're still going to get the exclusion on the gain of the investment itself, even if you don't shield any gains from this program. So there's going to be, I think, an impetus on those types of situations where you'd want to look at maybe doing the Oz program anyway, because it's still going to be nice to have that complete deferral of gain on the actual investment in the Oz district itself is exempt from gain. So that's a real powerful tool that kind of people, I don't think have talked much about, but I think is a real advantage of the program.
Well, Or I think the city could take more aggressive stance, as was mentioned. Some other communities are where, maybe you're marketing a specific type of a project that the community is wanting to see. So I think it can be a spectrum. One of the things I think is education. So like this kind of event where we're trying to get the word out to the community, people who may have an interest in this and understanding what these are. We can certainly do that. And I think there's an opportunity too. There's some things that are natural as I see it, that are things that we know we have a tremendous investment in the existing business parks. So we want to see additional investment occur in the parks. To me, that is a natural target for us to look at continuing to market in the park and have this additional tool that we can talk about, it being an opportunity zone. And we have been, anyway, when businesses have expressed interest, we've been talking with them about, they have been in a new markets tax credit zone, and that could be a potential for them to look at. But now they have an opportunity zone, neither of which require any additional approvals by the city. But then, as we know, businesses may have interest in other incentives that then do require city approval that they need to go through, but there may be an ability for a business to stack these incentives together and really make a project work that maybe otherwise wouldn't. So I think how the community wants to market this in other ways with, I'll say, community projects, for example, I think is something that we need to discuss as a community. My thought is that, again, the downtown master plan will hopefully point in some directions, at least regarding that particular geographic area. And again, this would only the east side of Massachusetts Street would be eligible. But are there anything that will be identified in that plan that may be something that we want to pursue and market as a community, as a project that we want to see? As mentioned before, the whole food desert issue, grocery project, which we still don't know what will come from, but will it be possible to use this tool as additional leverage to be able to provide an incentive for that kind of a project? So I think there's much more discussion to be had. It's just the beginning of a discussion of it as I see it, because again, we're still finding out what exactly will be the final regulation that's on this particular tool.
This is a federal benefit that flows directly to investors. So you could have a total scenario where a city doesn't even know about opportunities of investments that are happening. And I'm sure that that's probably going to happen because there's no trigger. It doesn't usurp local land controls. They don't get to play down the front card and say, hey, we get to do this. So there's really no way that the city would know unless it takes a proactive engagement in that effort. So we're kind of encouraging local leaders to begin thinking about ways to kind of tie the big picture together. That's what we think kind of local government's very good at, because they have the networks and the institutional knowledge to be able to do that. So if there are certain policy priorities that a community wants to see, if there are strategic investments in placemaking or affordable housing, for example, then to begin to think about, okay, we want to see these kinds of investments in these areas, so what can we do to kind of sweeten and offer a sweetener in the event that they are delivering some of these policy priorities for us. So, I think that conversation is beginning to happen. So that's, obviously kind of part of what today's about, but also kind of, taking in the information of what particular policy priorities are. They could be potentially undertaken if they're going to be combined with another tax credit. So we've seen kind of nonprofits, for example, take advantage of new markets to build, like a community service center or a service center, a clinic or a shelter or whatever it may be. So in those instances, I think that nonprofits can take advantage of it. If there are certain projects that they need to attract capital to, to it, and as long as they can pay a return on that capital to some extent and show kind of an appreciation on it, then I don't think there's anything that would stop a nonprofit from being the sponsor of a project that's utilizing opportunity zone funds.
I think there's a lot of space for impact investing, where, folks aren't necessarily looking for the economic return as much as they are the sort of impact return, which can align with some of the nonprofit priorities. There's also some different things that nonprofits can do if they have projects or business ventures that they do want to pursue that are aligned with their current mission statements. You could potentially utilize a for-profit subsidiary of a nonprofit and engage in the program utilizing that method. So there are some different ways of thinking outside the box, and I think that nonprofits should definitely engage with their community foundations and their partners in the community to explore different priorities and issues. So the one that I noticed really right off the bat was Pennsylvania. Erie has a flagship opportunity zone group. They brought together something like 35 different community partners, and they sat in a room and they talked about what they wanted to see done in their community, and they put together a really interesting and compelling prospectus talking about what the projects were that were available, what the city was doing, what the state could do, and they presented in a very remarkable fashion. It is really about bringing together the people in your community who care about what's happening, bringing together the developers, the projects, the potential investors, any partners that you can bring to the table. That is what they did, and it's out there on the internet. They have a really great group. They've been extremely helpful in helping other communities and other states understand what communities can do to engage. They worked with the new localism advisor group. They have kind of a how-to for communities on how to build an investment prospectus. I think that's a really good example. I think the how-to is a really nice way to kind of follow along, because the thing to note about looking at other opportunity zones is that no two opportunity zones are going to have the same bundle of assets to offer an investor, and they aren't going to have the same priorities either. But as Jeff mentioned, this is scalable, and it is very much a community-driven program. So what one community is doing, while they might have a kind of blueprint that you can follow, it isn't going to be copy over to your community. You're going to need to work together. But I'm happy to provide those resources.
In terms of particular, we kind of Lexington, I think, has been pointed out as a group that's kind of taken, or a community that's kind of taken a really proactive leap around it. It seems like the investment prospectus is kind of the output that seems to be where communities are going, but I think probably what's more valuable is the process that created that prospectus. So having those conversations, because like I think as Jordan mentioned, none of these two opportunity zones are going to be the same or offer the same opportunities. They're not going to have the same strengths. They're not going to have the same weaknesses that you want to mitigate. Definitely kind of the leading communities are identifying what those policy priorities are for them, and then trying to figure out how can we kind of weave additional incentives or process improvements or whatever it may be to help them achieve particular objectives that maybe a project may not necessarily undertake because it's not going to add value to that project right away. But if they can kind of sit there and hold it, I was kind of talking with Diane earlier about kind of, public space is kind of one of these things that is kind of hard to get developers to include into projects sometimes, but over the long term it actually creates more value for the project and for everybody else. But kind of in the short and medium term, it's kind of hard to make those things pencil out. So if there's opportunities like that, for example, if you want to see park improvement or public space expanded or whatever it may be, then the community having a conversation about that, and identifying where in the zone there may be good opportunities for that. So it's kind of like the leading. It's just, I think, going through the process. I think the process usually tends to be as important as
Well, I mean, generally, I do a lot of the project stuck with it, I guess, but, you always start on every project with what is the rate of return that an investor needs to be interested in your project, and what is the cash-to-cash return that they need to be interested in your project. Those are the first two things that you always start with, and then you have to work backwards from there to figure out, okay, here's kind of how much we can afford to spend to build this project based on, what our projections are for income and expense and that sort of thing. So anything that impacts the after-tax return for the investor is going to be positive in terms of getting to those kind of minimum criteria that every investor has. So we have a tendency to do find as many incentives as we can, whether they're an IRB or a TIF district or historic tax credit. We're always looking for every single weapon that we can find to help offset and to help subsidize. This project or this program is designed to encourage new investment. And anytime you build new investment in any area, whether it's on the west side of town, the east side of town, or anywhere, it's always harder to get to those required returns because the cost per square foot is typically going to be more expensive than an existing building or existing house or existing apartment complex or whatever. I mean, building brand new is always more difficult because it's more expensive. And so I think that also helps, gives you that extra ammunition you need to try to get to the numbers. I'm kind of like Jeff. I don't think this is being a real deep, strong. I mean, this is not a real deep or strong incentive, but certainly with respect to the right person that's going to make an investment, if they happen to just sell their business, if your timing is right, I guess, if they happen to just sell their business or they sold something else and they didn't do that kind of exchange or whatever the situation is, but they are sitting there and they've got a decent amount of money that they want to invest in a project, and they're looking at losing a third of that local sale in the state of Kansas through capital gains taxes, then that certainly helps as well in terms of raising capital for your project. It kind of depends on the timing a little bit, of course, because you have that 180-day requirement. You got to get the money invested in it within 180 days. So I think that's also helpful. So I don't see any real negatives of the program other than just have to be able to kind of navigate through those aspects. The timing aspects make it a little more difficult because of the 180-day rule and that type of thing. But so I think generally it's a good program. I haven't seen anybody use it yet, so I talked to Mike Ward, who does a lot of work for a lot of developers in town. He hasn't seen anybody use it yet. So I don't think it's really widely used yet or widely known about. So